tall, gangly thing?
Hello everybody, and welcome to Hyrule Radio episode number 3. My name is Nick DePasquale. You may know me as Gangly, and today I'm joined by two very special guests. It's Ramblinnn, Robin, the most successful duos team in North American history. Very happy to have you both here today. Ramblinnn, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I mean, it's not my first time talking with you, but it's always a pleasure. So involved in this, new. I think it's a really cool idea. I think it's been really enjoyable to watch so far.
Appreciate it. Robin, how you doing?
Oh, doing great. Chilling. Thanks for having me. I'm ready to argue with some people. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, so before we can kind of have some time just to talk about things. There's a lot to talk about right now, but real quick, let me just explain how this show works. So this is a live call-in show, which means that you, the viewer, have an active part in what happens tonight. If you're watching live on Twitch right now, you can use the command !Discord. If you do that, you'll find a link to my Discord. Go in there, and under the Submit Topics channel, you can go in and give your question, your hot take, your opinion, whatever it is that you want to talk about on the show. We've got a lot to talk about today. We've got Worlds that just happened. We have Set 7 being announced. We have the Don't Talk If You Don't Know panel releasing their final power rankings of Set 6 this Thursday at 9:30 p.m. And our ballots are due tonight. Actually, all three of us on the show right now have to submit ballots by the end of tonight. And so if you want to have a little bit of sway in that, feel free to give us your opinion on who you think deserves a top 15 spot. So that's the layout of how this show works. We're going to be going for quite a while, so feel free to let those takes populate for a little bit. And in the meantime, let's talk about Worlds. Obviously, that's kind of the first thing on everybody's minds. North America doing pretty well, but ultimately coming up short. Maybe like the biggest thing to kind of talk about though is like China dominating day 3. I mean, I'm assuming, did you guys both watch live?
Yeah, I did a watch party for it, so I watched every single game.
What were your like kind of immediate responses to Worlds this time around?
I mean, my biggest like takeaway just from watching is I really enjoyed the first 2 days. I expected to. Everybody knows that it's a Sivir meta, and Sivir kind of dominated the first 2 days, but there was still that extra layer of variety on top that kept things interesting, and I think you can have augments to thank for that. Seeing augments in a competitive format, especially on this level of competition, was really exciting and interesting to me, so I'm really glad they're sticking with that for the future. Day 3 came around. We all know what happened then. I mean, NA usually is pretty consistent in like having decent performances, just not quite able to close it out strong, and that's pretty much where I ended up again this time. I think Goobum's in 5th and Goose in 7th. Not anything to be ashamed of, to be proud. Those are great finishes at 5th in the world. I mean, that's amazing to me. So, and then of course you have China on top. And the thing about, they were obviously the best players in the best region in the tourney, but when you have a format like Checkmate and we only get that 4-game sample size, you always like to think what could have happened to the next couple of games. And that's kind of where I was disappointed this time, is to have those first 2 days that were 6 games of really exciting moments, and then day 3 was just kind of a steamroll and wasn't really anything to be excited about to me.
Robin, what were your thoughts?
So I recently just fixed my sleep schedule, so I actually didn't manage to watch that many games for day 1, day 2. I watched like 3 games and I went to bed. But the last day, I watched every single game. Well, it's 4 games. I managed to stay up. But overall, I don't know why, but I felt like last Worlds had a better experience last Worlds. Even though I played in last Worlds, but I got eliminated. I guess I only watched 1 day, right? The final day, I guess. I forgot.
Yeah, you got eliminated day 2.
Okay, now that I think about it, like I thought that it was like a production diff, but now that I think about it, it was probably just like a last day. It was closer last year than this year, I guess. Because after I finished watching it this year, I didn't feel that like it was kind of veg, kind of like I guess like no one had cam. You can't see anyone's expressions, and you can't really watch. Like no one was allowed to like no one. I mean, I guess GVA was streaming and Goobums after later end. But I think I think like it was kind of hard to like try to look at Milk's perspective, I guess, or like I don't know. But yeah, it felt kind of more like emotionless, I guess. Like someone won and it was just like, oh, no expression, and then like 4 games, and then we're out here. Next set.
I'm gonna be honest. I feel like a part of that has to just be like the way in which China won. Like it really just felt like they took hold of every game and just didn't let go. And so I'm gonna be honest. I watched game 1, or no, I missed game 1. I watched game 2. I watched like most of game 3, and then I had to go help get my kids ready. And I was like, okay, I'll just come back in a little bit and catch the rest of the world. And it was just over. I just didn't get to watch anymore. And it's just like, there's nothing you can do about it, right? Like this is what the Checkmate format. It's one of the drawbacks of Checkmate is that, like, there is a possibility that the tournament ends in 4 games. And, it's cool. If you were a fan of these players, it would be really cool to watch Goobums dominate in 4 games. Like, we would have thought that was so hype. But, man, like, not being in the top 2 for the entirety of the day, or even the top 3, I don't think Goobums or Goose were in the top 3 all day. It did feel like it felt very distant. And it made the day kind of feel a bit like, oh man, like it's over.
It's kind of like a blowout, I guess, right?
On the flip side, though, like if it actually was 6 games, it probably would have felt even more like that, right? Because you would have just been watching the games 4 and 5 or 5 and 6, knowing that we have no chance of winning.
Like it really depends on what you watch Worlds for, and like it's gonna come down to the person, the player, and the viewer. But I don't personally put a lot of weight into who wins. I don't care. Like if let's say I was to make the Worlds, I don't really care if I win. I just want to do my best. And so the same thing holds true when I'm watching my favorite players, the people I want to support. I want them to place as best as possible. So the more games I get to see them try to earn that placement, the better for me. I don't, TFT is such a game of variance that I'm not going to be upset if they don't win, because you can never expect to win, but you can expect to do your best. And maybe that wasn't their best. Maybe we needed a couple more games to see that.
Yeah, I loved that. Like in regionals, we kind of introduced this 4th place. The 4th spot was given to the player with the best average placement across the weekend. For the reason you listed, that like you are not always playing for 1st, you're not always playing for 4th. Sometimes you actually are just looking to turn your 8th into a 5th, right? That's just the reality of the game we play. Or sometimes you're given spots where you just can't do much better. But I also feel like, is there a way to reward like the larger sample size at Worlds? Like, should we actually be crowning obviously the person who wins a Checkmate format, but also giving credit to like the players who made the top 8 and also had like the best average placement, or like highlighting that, you know what I mean? Like instead of just like, let's say for instance, Goobums dominated day 1 of Worlds, dominated day 2, and then came up short in day 3. Like, to me, it makes sense for the players who are actually like performing throughout the weekend, even if they don't actually win the tournament, to still be highlighted in some way.
Yeah, maybe they can get like a bonus prize pool on the side, like highest average placement or something.
Yeah, I feel like it also kind of. Oh, sorry, were you gonna say something, Ramblinnn?
Yeah, I'm in pretty similar idea. I think that's something that you've been missing in a lot of TFT tournaments, is incentive that to play that isn't just winning or getting as high as possible placement. The first 2 days, and this starts to bleed into a different problem, but you always get to the tail end of games, and either you're so far ahead it doesn't matter, and you can just AFK and take your qualification because the points don't carry over, or you're so far behind that you have nothing to play for, and that really degrades the quality in the last couple of games. So I'm always pushing and hopeful for something that gives players to play the entire way out that isn't just competitive integrity.
All right, here's my pitch for that then. I thought about this recently. What if events had almost like an Olympic style scoring system where, like, on top of playing for yourself, you're also playing for like for Worlds, it would be like for your country, and there's like a set of points you're earning for your region. Obviously, the problem with that is then you would need equal representation, and so we're like taking slots from China and giving them to OCE. And obviously, like, people are going to be frustrated with that, especially if you're from China. But like on a smaller scale, I think it'd be kind of fun to see in North America. Like, what if people had to set teams of like 4 at the beginning of a set, and then on top of playing for individual qualification for Worlds, you're also playing to like earn points for your team. I don't know exactly what it would look like, but do you know what I'm saying?
I get the idea. I just think that's really hard to implement in a game of like where you're playing for yourself and you're going to be playing against your teammates. I think you just start to look at the possibility of double up ever becoming something actually competitive in the future. We know it hasn't gotten an official release yet, but just based on the experience me and Robin had so far, I think if they were to put that effort into it and the resources to devote that to the double up side as well, I think that'd be cool to have. Like people always ask me, do you think double up should replace solos as the main competitive format? Of course not. I think they should both exist. I think it'd be cool to have both as an option to compete in.
Yeah, I think one of like the biggest issues of TFT is like the time it takes to play a game, right? Like every single podcast, I always like kind of circle back to Smash because it's kind of like where I'm, it's kind of my background in esports. But it's like when you go to a 3-day major in Smash, it's like you can enter singles, you can enter doubles. And it's like across the 3 days, like sometimes you play all of your matches in one day, but like it's natural for a player who's playing singles to also just enter doubles. And it's just like a fun way to explore the different formats. But in TFT, it's like, how do you really do that? You can't really have a singles tournament and a doubles tournament ever running at the same time unless you're having like an overlapping format like that, like the Olympics or whatever, however else you would want to do it. Yeah. But, let's see. I want to see actually how many takes we have coming in right now, just so I know how much more time we can kind of just talk for a bit. We actually kind of have a lot going on here. We can still talk for a little bit more. I know Blind is already kind of bringing some people into the waiting room and into the up next. But other things I do want to just talk about real quick is this idea of China dominating Worlds, but also winning the mock tournament. I was kind of I said this in a Discord earlier today where I personally think it's really validating to see a region where they take the game so seriously dominate on the international stage, both in like the mock event and in the actual world championship. How much stock do you guys put into like China just being better than everyone versus they happen to win and happen to get the situations that they needed in order to win those events?
I think go ahead, Robin.
Okay. I mean, I think China's just better. But I think it's because I think they're better because they're more invested in the scene. So they have more people playing and more people taking it seriously. So they have more people theory crafting, right? So they usually are ahead of the meta versus every other region. So like I don't know, like the what is that? The Lucian, what's that hextech augment called? Stored power Lucian. I can guarantee you like 90% of people in NA would not have taken that route. And I think he got first that game, right? So like they probably wouldn't have taken stored power. This shit sucks. And then can I custom this? I don't know.
Yeah, you can. You're good.
Okay, it's like stored power. Oh my god, I low rolled, right? Whatever. And then they just pick something else. And like yeah, that's like an example, right? And then like they also play like Blade Master Cho'Gath with BT. Like I don't think anyone would take that round. I think he got like a top 4 or something, right? Or like I don't know if he got first.
He won the game, but it wasn't the Cho'Gath that won, and he just it carried him through the game, like the early in the mid game, which is what you want Cho'Gath to do.
Yeah.
It got him BT, to where he needed to go.
Bramble, yeah. Cho'Gath, Blade Master, and then like got to level 9.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty interesting. So, I mean, I think they're just better, but not because of like they're just like Chinese, but like because like they're more invested in the scene, more money's in the scene. They have like I think you get paid if you're top rank, so they have incentive to be top rank so that they play more.
Wow, like on ladder.
That's what I heard. I don't know if it's true, but on ladder, like rank 1 or rank 2, rank 3 gets weekly bonuses. So it gives you incentive to stay on the ladder. I don't know if it's true or not. That's what they said. And also I heard they have what they call red envelope in-houses. So they run in-houses with all these top players before Worlds, train them for Worlds, and then they get prize money for the in-houses.
Wow.
So yeah, it's more incentive to play and train, you know. Yeah.
Ramblinnn, what were you gonna say?
I mean, I think anyone's kidding themselves if they don't say China is the best region right now, but I do think that the differences between them and any other region is definitely overstated. When you look at the results of Worlds, yes, they were 1-2, but that's just 2 of their 6 players. There's 4 other players that didn't even make it to the finals. So was it really China as a region that dominated everybody else, or was it those 2 players? And to me, it's those 2 players. Of course, they come from that region. There's a reason they are the best. But I don't look at that and say, wow, I can't compete with China. I think those players are really good, and that's awesome for them. But I would never think that no one else can compete with them. Everybody's right there. I mean, they played 4 games, and they did better in those 4 games. Great for them. I'm happy for them.
Either way, I mean, I think I speak for everyone when I say that, like, it'd be cool to see North America adopt, the seriousness that TFT seems to be treated with over in China. But either way, I think we're ready to take some calls. I know we have some people waiting, so I'm going to bring in our first caller right now. And Jirachi's here. Jirachi, where are you calling from?
Hi. Yes. The take I have is that assassins take a lot of skill, like a lot of skill to play well.
I am going to defer to both Ramblinnn and Robin on this.
Also, hi y'all.
Hello.
How you doing,
Hello.
Jirachi?
Welcome, Jirachi.
I'm good. How are y'all?
Good. Yeah, I'm going to defer to you guys too. One of you take this first. Ramblinnn, you want to get started?
Sure. I don't think I have a strong opinion on this one way or the other, but like I can't disagree with it. Like they obviously take a unique skill set. I just can't speak to how much of that skill set is knowledge based versus like actual in-game decision making. I think that comes from the experience that you probably have compared to a lot of other players playing that comp. And I think once you accumulate that experience, you can play the assassin comp well. And I'm not saying no everybody can play it as well as you can. I probably couldn't because that's not my preference of style. But I imagine a lot of that is just people aren't as familiar with that style as you are.
Robin, did you want to take this? If not, I'm going to kind of ask a follow-up question.
Oh, I just want to say I think it does take skill, but I think it really depends on what comp it is, and it depends on what assassin it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it really does depend on which assassin. I think Twitch the Twitch and Kha'Zix take the least positioning skill because I think the skill of like the skill of playing the comps and the level patterns, that's an entirely different thing. The skill of taking like whatever assassins you have right in front of you and then positioning them. I think that takes honestly more skill than positioning a lot of other comps in the game besides like some of the AP comps, because I listen to Ramblinnn and Nico and y'all talk about like Renata and Ahri positioning, and that blows my mind. Like Twitch and Kha'Zix positioning are honestly pretty low cap, but like Nocturne and even LeBlanc last set and Talon this set, Cat a little less so, but in general, a lot of the assassins, I think, like there's so much depth to how you position them that I think a lot of people don't recognize.
All right, so let me ask you this, Jirachi. I'm assuming, well, actually, let me preface this. For anyone who's watching the show right now and doesn't know who Jirachi is a Talon, well, Jirachi is many things, but Jirachi right now is a Talon one trick currently playing on the OCE server. They currently are ranked 20, I believe, playing all Talon.
Rank 10.
Rank 10, playing all Talon with like a 70% top 4 rate. Jirachi, watching Worlds, I want to know this. Did you see anybody leaving points on the table by not taking a Talon route that you think they could have taken? Or do you think that you kind of have to lean into playing Talon like from the start?
I don't think you necessarily have to lean into playing Talon from the start, but I think I didn't get to watch too much of Worlds because I tested positive for COVID a week ago and have been recovering and trying not to wake up at 5 a.m. And destroying my health. From what I saw, there's probably some players that could have played Talon that had the angles. It's just they're not as comfortable doing it, or they don't think the comp is good, so they just don't take that route. Otherwise, I'm not really sure. I know Megumin played it to a 4th just off Talon 3, and I was watching him. I was like, yeah, this guy knows what he's doing more or less.
Well, I can say that as someone who has peaked in TFT when I was just one-tricking Nocturne. Shout out to Jose Paulo. I'm going to go ahead and agree with the take. I'm going to say this is a great take. I think that one of the things that's cool about Assassins, and I actually feel like Talon in particular, is that the skill expression is not only in like the positioning, but also in like knowing the branches of the comp of like when to dip on rerolling and go into like a larger debonair, larger debonair line, like playing something like, I don't know, like Assassin Draven, for instance. It like might be a way to kind of extend that line when you know kind of the state of your game. I know that was definitely a thing with like Nocturne, even like, being able to understand when to roll, when to level, when to give up and play for like 4th versus like you're all in on top 1, top 2. I do think there is skill expression. I do think that Ramblinnn and Robin both seem to not have super hot takes or hot opinions on this. So, Jirachi, I think we're going to move on to our next caller. But before you go, is there anything you want to shout out?
Thanks for having me. This is a great idea, and I'm glad we have more space or more content in the TFT space. Totally should have asked something about Worlds, but thanks for having me anyway.
All right.
Jirachi.
See you later, Jirachi. All right. Up next, I know that Bryce did have a take, but he's not here to ask it himself. So we're going to have our producer Blind come on and ask in Bryce's stead. All right. So Blind is here, and you're actually muted. All right. Blind is here. How you doing? What do you want to talk about?
I'm doing good, thanks. Calling in for our friend Bryce Blum here. The question is, or the hot take is, how is everyone evaluating Soju's overall performance this set? Does he belong in the top 15? And if so, where?
Oh, actually, yeah. Robin and Ramblinnn, you guys can't hear him because you probably had him muted.
I can hear him in Discord.
Oh, in Discord.
Yeah.
Robin, I'll give you the take just in case you couldn't hear it. But he's saying, how do you evaluate Soju's overall performance this set? Does he belong in the top 15? And if so, where? We're getting right down to the nitty gritty. We said that the Don't Talk If You Don't Know Power Rankings panel or the show is this Thursday, and we have to put in our ballots tonight. So this is really everyone's chance to kind of leak a little bit about their ballot. So I am definitely not going first. So Robin is
definitely first here.
Okay, I'll go first. So originally I was doing my top 15 yesterday. Originally I had Soju, near the bottom of the list. But chat was going crazy saying Soju soiks this set. So I looked him up on Liquipedia, like his tournament placements and stuff. And yeah, he actually didn't do. Because I thought he was actually pretty good for set 6, but his tournament placements were not that good. But I think his solo queue is pretty good. I think he should. I think he's on the list, but like on the bottom.
Ramblinnn, you want to follow up, or you want me to go?
Sure, I can go. I don't know, man. I love Soju. I think he's a better player than people give him credit, but he didn't do himself any favors this set. Like, you look at the only event he really had success in was Challenger Series, and I'm really happy for him that he made it to regionals. But every other event, he just was not able to back up what I wanted him, my opinion of him, which is I still think he's a great player. I still think he's one of the best 15 players in North America. I don't think he was one of the best 15 players in North America this set. So I am very unlikely to put him on my list, and I don't think he's actually, maybe he's not even within contention for 15 for me. I think he's in maybe the top 20.
And actually, let me just preface this with the criteria for this panel for this time around is actually a little bit harder on tournament results. We're really trying to take a look at, based on how they performed when it mattered most, were they able to show up? So while ladder does have an impact on whether people put them on their top 15 list, all of the panelists were asked to look at the tournament results and kind of use that as a larger or weightier metric than in the past. I'm in a similar place as Robin. I think that Soju right now is kind of hovering between the bottom of my list and coming off the list. I think that Soju is a really good player. He's had some very high highs in the past. In fact, for the majority of set 6, not 6.5, he was making the final day of a lot of events and was actually, he was kind of going like 8, 7, whatever in the final day, but he was making it to the final day, which is an accomplishment. It's not easy to make final day of any event. I don't think he was necessarily bad. The problem, for me at least, was that when Soju was in a lot of these events, it was so common to see him have bad placement after bad placement over and over, to the point where out of all the players at regionals, he actually had, and let me look at my numbers here. He was 21st out of 24 in average placement, with a larger sample size than a lot of the field, which, you can say what you want. Average placement over 50 games doesn't tell the whole story. But to me, when you have the difference between, Soju at, I think it was 4.7 for his average placement versus like someone in first who was at that 3.5 mark. I think that a place and a half is a pretty large metric to judge over 50 to 70 games, and really does give you a little bit of information on where Soju was over the course of set 6 and 6.5. I think I also think he is a top 15 player, but I don't necessarily think that he performed like a top 15 player this set. So that's my thought on it. I don't know. Do you guys have any follow-up thoughts on that?
I think part of it's not just that he didn't perform that well, but when I look at the other players that I would normally rate lower than him, they performed really well this set compared to how they normally perform. And that makes it hard to want me to pick him over them when I feel like maybe they're not as good of a player, but they were definitely better at set 6 to me.
Yeah, I hard agree with that. Robin, you thinking something?
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, I think if it was purely tournament, he wouldn't be on the list. But I think I take solo queue into account, and he did pretty good in solo queue, I think. So yeah.
I will say, if anyone wants to call in making an argument for a specific player, we are all ears. I would love to hear someone actually fighting for a player they'd like to see make it into the top 15. So if you do have a take about that, feel free to throw that into the Discord. The last, kind of bouncing off of Ramblinn's point, like I want to echo that like there are a lot of players that showed up this set that just kind of popped off in tournament. Like to me, the ones that stand out, I mean, Solus is a good example that I think a lot of people would. I don't know. I actually don't know. Do you think would people have put Solus top 15 before set 6?
I think he's on the bubble. Like everybody knows he's good, but nobody ever thinks him as one of the best. So it probably just depends on who you ask.
Yeah. And then you go for it. Go for it.
No, I said I think like he was really good set 4, and then I think if what I remember set 5 he went like down, but then set 6 he like revived it, I think.
Yeah. I was talking to Bryce about this earlier, that when you kind of take the average placements of all the players and kind of stack them up, there's like a clear bubble of like who the best performing players are, and it's like these tiers of 3 or 4 players all the way down. It's actually very, very clear to see, but it's cool. Like the top 3 for average placement is like your Ramblinnn, Spicy Appies, Goo Bums are there, and Solus is in like that next bubble there with players like Asa, who performed really well, especially in the first half of set 6. I think maybe DQA might be there as well. They're actually, there's like a handful of players that just had really strong tournament results that I think overvalue them based on like how good they actually are or how good people think they actually are. Makes it really hard to see. But also, the reason I want to say this is just shout out to players like Solus and Kivix and Pawn Up and Roby Van Knob, who just came out of the woodwork really to a lot of people and put up some incredible results. So definitely want to shout all those players out. Before we move on, do you guys have any last thoughts?
No, I think that's all.
All right, then let's get right into our next caller. All right, Danny Donuts is here. Danny Donuts, where are you calling in from?
Hello, I'm calling in from New Hampshire.
All right, what do you want to talk about?
All right, so this is a bit of a deep take, so bear with me here. It's a little bit of background. I came over to TFT from Hearthstone. I was fairly involved in the community. I had a podcast where we covered all aspects of Hearthstone, including like the game development and even the design team. I've seen a lot of parallels between the game as TFT grows. I've seen a lot of things that have happened in Hearthstone. And after reading the dev post today that Mort put out, it spawned a bit of a hot take. So, I mean, we all know that Mort is one of the best game developers in the video game industry. I mean, he's the face of TFT, but he does so much for the game, right? He's on Reddit, Twitter, he casted Worlds, puts out patch rundowns, acts as a direct line of communication to high-level players, has his own stream. He wears so many hats. So my hot take is that while this relationship is great in the short term, it provides the kindling to get TFT growing, ultimately it's bad in the long run for the TFT community. And if Mort ever leaves TFT for whatever reason, the game is done. So, I mean, this is similar to what happened in Hearthstone when Ben Brode left. I mean, and Ben Brode wasn't even as good or as involved as Mort Dog, and it's a concern that I have. And Mort joked during the set learnings saying, "Hey, it's maddening. You might want to yell out the name of a dev," and he put Kent and Whitrock there, where we all go through and say, "Oh, I got Mort Dogged," right? It's as a joke, but seriously, if you want to look into that, like, you guys are the pillars of the TFT community. Do you guys have any insight on this? Or if, like, this is like a 50,000-foot view of the situation, but is there anything that we can do? Should we be concerned about this? Should we look into it? I know it's a little bit of a serious take, but...
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think it's something worth talking about. Do either of you guys want to take it first?
No, go ahead.
I think that you are presenting a very serious issue that is probably true to a certain extent. So again, like I literally always circle back to Smash, right? Where like Smash is a grassroots scene that I came from, where everything is run by the community. Everything is run by the people who love this game so much that they would do anything to keep it alive. I think one of the issues is that because people come from League of Legends and kind of made that transition from a game with so much developers to support, so much developers support that it became like the #1 esport, I feel like, worldwide for who knows how long. There's almost an expectation for Riot to do a lot of the heavy lifting for us. And I think that's bled over into TFT in the form of people will complain in any game. Like in Melee, people complain about Melee all the time. It's the same game as it was 21 years ago, right? Like, I do think, though, the amount of pressure that the community puts on Mort to fix the problems that come up is not only unhealthy for him, but also creates like a cycle of unhealthy habits for the community itself. I don't know if I would go so far to say that like TFT would be dead without Mort. It's hard to say that because we don't know what would happen. I do think, though, that like Mort is like a crutch for the scene, and it feels wrong saying, because that makes it sound like he's doing something wrong, and he's not. Like, he's doing everything he can to keep the scene alive. But I almost wish that, like, what if just a period of time everyone would stop worrying about what Mort Dog is doing and like let's just play the game and let's figure out how to enjoy this without complaining about everything, without, I don't know. I don't even know exactly where I'm going with this. It's kind of hard to talk about, to be honest. But Ramblinnn and Robin, you guys have any thoughts on it?
Sure, I have a few thoughts on it. First is that I think it's a really interesting topic to even bring up because it's not something almost any of the community is surely thinking about, the idea of Mort leaving. It's just kind of an assumption that we're going to have him forever, and we don't know what forever is when it comes to TFT. I love TFT. I don't think it's going to last forever, but I also think you're putting a little bit too much weight into what Mort himself does for the game, and I love Mort again. I think he's done a ton for the game, but I also think the team as a whole is not just Mort, it's Kent and anybody else that's backing up, everybody that he's brought in and worked with, and like he's building a team to, if something were to happen to him where he does leave, I think they could carry the weight, and maybe not on the same level as Mort because he is that public facing figure, but I think what he's brought to TFT, a lot of it is permanent. It's like he's broken the wall down for us. He's made the community, in something we can interact with the devs, and assuming that connection still stays around even if he were to leave, I don't think we'd be in too bad of shape. I also think it's weird to say that it's bad in the long run because that assumes that he's going to leave, and as long as he doesn't leave, the only thing I'd be worried about is Mort himself, honestly. I feel like sometimes he puts himself in a little too deep, and I'm worried about his mental health, and I wouldn't want anything to happen to him. So that's honestly, if I'm concerned about anything, it's Mort himself.
Stepin, do you think that if we changed like communications or opened it up so that more faces were being shown, that would be a better thing? It looks like he's already trying to do that with the patch rundowns, but I mean, he is the main source of information on things like Twitter. Like, if there's a bug, he'll go through and he'll post it up on his Twitter, and like you can't really find that elsewhere sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's something they could improve on, honestly, and that's not just for the sake of Mort or to leave, but right now I don't think a lot of people like having to go to Mort Dog Twitter. They find that a little unprofessional. I think that's understandable. They want a more formal source to look to, and like some people don't even use Twitter to begin with, but I do like that they do the patch rundown and stuff where we get to see some of the other devs, and of course none of them are streaming on Twitch and interacting with chat in the same way, but just knowing that they're there listening, and I talk to them on Discord every now and then, like they're definitely, they're just as accessible, maybe not to everyone, but at least to a certain subset of the community. They're definitely listening.
Robin, what are you thinking?
Oh, I feel like TFT will be fine even if Mort leaves. Like, I feel like it'll be fine. I feel like if TFT dies, it's not because Mort left. I feel like it's because people just moved on to another game, or like the genre is not popular anymore. I think Mort's great for the scene, but if Mort leaves, we're just gonna bitch at someone else. Like, every game, someone bitches at a game. Like, we're just gonna say Riot, not Mort Dog, right? Like, people in League still bitch about League, right? But they don't have a public figure to bitch at, so they just say Riot, fix your game, right? But yeah, I think it'll be fine. As far as like bugs, patches, and stuff, like if Mort Dog leaves, they're gonna figure out a way to have that information, right? Like, he's not gonna just like they're saying like not have like information anymore. So I feel like it'll be fine. And I feel like Mort Dog is good for the like. I feel like, even if you think like Mort Dog, whatever Mort Dog's doing is gonna be bad in the long run, like I don't think he should stop what he's doing if it's good for us.
Oh no, on the contrary, right? He has so many hats. He does so much amazing stuff for TFT, and I didn't mean to put it in like he's doing a bad job. He's doing a fantastic job.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also think it's important to note that, like, I know based on like the interviews I've done with a handful of different rioters, they are expanding. They are expanding the team. They're constantly bringing on new people. From what I understood, there was a point in time where they like couldn't expand fast enough, and that was kind of creating a bottleneck in like whatever it is that they were trying to do. I think that Riot, I hope that Riot understands that the amount Mort does for the scene, even with little things that should be done, like posting tournament results on his Twitter when like the official TFT account doesn't do it for themselves. There's a lot of things that Mort does that I think Riot is planning on patching by hiring new people. The hope is that they can do that in a way that actually allows Mort to have like a healthy, relationship with his work and with this game that he's created. That really is a lot of fun for him. We all know that Mort loves this game. I mean, I don't think he would stream it every weekend after working on it all week if he didn't. The hope is just that, he'll be able to find that balance. I think that like maybe I'm getting a little too personal and like speculating kind of on how he feels about it. But like, I think it's fair to say that Riot's expanding the team, and the hope is that they can just expand that team fast enough to allow all of their rioters to have healthy boundaries with the game, so that they don't have to do more than really what's required of them through their job. But Danny, did you have any follow-up thoughts?
Not really. We covered all the points that I really wanted to touch on.
All right. Well, Danny, thank you so much for your take. We appreciate you calling in. Is there anything you want to shout out before you go?
I want to shout out Frodan, best dressed caster.
Very,
Agreed.
very true. That's a good shout out. All right. Well, Danny Donuts, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Have a great night.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right. We've got a couple other callers in the queue now that we're going to start bringing in, but just in case you're joining us now, I do want to just kind of plug how this show works in case you're joining us just in the last couple of minutes. That this is a live call-in show where if you're watching right now on Twitch, you can use a command !Discord. You can join our Discord, post your hot take, your question, your opinion, whatever it may be, and discuss it live with us on air. I feel like we've gotten a lot of like serious or conversational topics, and I'm really waiting for someone to kind of come in with like a hot take that we can kind of debate a bit more. So if you're in chat right now, we are looking for some spice. So feel free to call in. So we're going to go ahead with our next caller. All right, Mike Spam. Mike Spam's here. Where are you calling in from?
Seattle, Washington.
All right, Seattle. Very nice. And what do you want to talk about today?
So, with Worlds wrapping up, there's one thing you see on the CompTFT subreddit a lot, and I want to talk about it. And that's the question of whether or not Worlds is promoted enough by Riot. And I think that conversation is missing the point, frankly. I think, really, we should be having a conversation about whether or not the community, as vague of a term as that is sufficiently hyped for the tournament, and what sufficiently hyped means.
So you're saying that the problem is not that Riot is not promoting the event, it's that the community is not giving enough interest to the event to be worth promoting? Is that
essentially? There was a comment I hate singling out single comments online because, it's just like a random person. But there was one comment that really stuck out to me. And it was someone who was complaining they hadn't heard about the tournament. And when someone asked them, what do you follow? They say they don't play the game right now, they don't watch streams, and they barely check up on the subreddit, but they were surprised they hadn't heard about World. And at first, that seemed really silly, It's like, you don't consume any of this media, you expected it to just be airdropped into your brain? But then I was thinking about it more, and you think about any other game with a big tournament coming up, right? You hear about it through the community, right? Because people are talking about it, and people want to know what happens. I feel like that doesn't exist in TFT right now, and if we want to get more monetary support from Riot, we need something like that for them to be able to prop up.
Okay, real quick, I do want to say that Aegon is in chat right now saying email is the answer. And if Aegon wants to come on the show and give their take on this take, I'm down for Aegon to just hop in real quick, because I feel like Aegon is probably more prepared for this question than any of the three of us. I do have some thoughts, but I don't know, Ramblinnn or Robin, you guys want to?
Sure. I was not specifically what I was going to say, but I do think the idea of something you can subscribe to if you're specifically interested in esports notifications would be a good idea. So that way you're fully opt in. Obviously you have to get the information out that it's even available in the first place. But if you opt in, you should, at that point expect to always get notified, and you know where to look for it. So I'm not saying that's the only thing that needs to change, but I think that is an interesting idea.
I think, all right, so this is what I want to bring up. I hear what you're saying, but I also feel like you are making the assumption that the players all right, this is what I'm going to say. To me, the core problem is that you kind of need to generate some sort of hype around an event, or some sort of storyline around your scene, or some sort of big macro picture about this competitive circuit that you're running, in order for people to really feel justified to opt into those things. So I agree that, yes, the players who are saying, I don't check up on these things, I don't check Twitter, I don't check Reddit, I'm not actively looking for these things, of course you're not going to find it. I agree with that. But I also think that if Riot were to invest in TFT content that was, one, incredibly exciting to watch, easy to digest, and also built narratives around their players and their competitive scene. And, honestly, I don't even think the problem of our scene is not having enough money. I think that the amount of money they pour into these world championships and stuff for the amount of viewership that the game gets is actually kind of surprising. I think that
I had a take when I had first written this that I was told you guys get a lot, but it builds off of what you're saying, so we're live, I'm just going to say it anyway, which is, I think that for a lot of players, the idea of this game is in a capital T tournament versus this game is not, doesn't have enough of a visible distinction for people to really be excited like that. And I think if you wanted to promote one thing, you say, here is why tournament play is different from ladder play, and you let people get excited off of that.
I don't even know if I agree with that. All right, this is what here's my thought, okay? If I were to make a bunch of content series going into set 6 in order to generate hype, in order to make people care about the scene, these are the things I would talk about. After the Piltover Cup, who are the non-performers from sets 4 and 5 who now proved themselves in the first tournament that was 3 weeks into the set or whatever it was? You have people like Pawn Up, Spicy Appies coming out of the woodwork after very poor performances in previous sets. Who are these players and what changes have they made? Why aren't we not making any sort of hype video or recaps about these players? What about Ramblinnn, the best player in North America to not actually win one of these events yet? Why are we not producing content on this? What about Robinsongz and Milk, these titans of North America that have proved themselves on the world stage or in incredible tournaments? I just don't understand, if we want people to care, stop making people care about the tournaments when the tournaments are these 6-hour broadcasts. When I watch a tournament, I want to just check up on the players that I really care about to see how they're doing. That's my personal opinion. I think that if you are asking someone to care about a tournament itself, which is, 18 hours of broadcast over a weekend in order to make this game grow on the, wider, to me, I think that's wrong. To me, it's why not cater to the player or to the viewer who just wants to watch an hour or two of their favorite player competing in a tournament. And why not just give them an opportunity to learn about some of these really cool storylines that they can just check on quickly? I think that's actually
I would
a core
argue
problem.
back to you that, like, what's the difference there, right? If you care about a player, let's just use like player A, this magical player, and you are player A's biggest fan, shouldn't player A is in a tournament be new and exciting to you, right?
I
Is it
agree.
not? I mean, I don't understand.
think it is.
Isn't it? People love seeing Soju be in tournament. Like, even if he doesn't always perform, they want to see Soju do well. And like, he gets so many viewers when he's in a tournament doing any bit decently well.
I think Riot could definitely do a better job at promoting stuff. And like as Nick said, like storylines are very important. It makes the tournaments more hype, right? Like what are they playing for, stuff like that. But I think a big problem is like it's because like we don't have any LAN events right now. I think once we start having LAN events, things will get better because I mean, I don't think you can use this world. Like you're from NA, right? I don't think you can use this world as an example of like not that much exposure for NA because first of all, the time zone is so bad for NA that I'm pretty sure like 80% of the people can't even watch it from NA. And then secondly, so that means like they don't have interest in it because they can't even watch it. They just look at the results. If you compare it to China, like I'm pretty sure TFT in China is super popular. They have LAN events. They have all these events. They have a great production team and stuff like that. You know, they have like, you know, the people go like they have like photo shoots of the players and stuff, you know, and stuff like that. So and if we compare it to like Europe, right? I don't know if you know Sean's, but he's like the biggest EU streamer, the French community. He averaged a ton of viewers on his stream, like 30K, 40K, I think, for Worlds. So they have like more interest in, you know, EU. The time zone's better, right? I just think that like I don't think you can compare this and last Worlds kind of to like in an NA because it's the time zone is really bad. And I think that people who like TFT, they'll know about Worlds. Like if they play TFT and they actually like watch the tournaments, if they like watching the competitive scene, they'll know when that Worlds is coming up. The people that don't know Worlds coming up is because they probably don't even want to watch it, or like they just play it casually. But Riot could definitely do a better job though, for sure, at promoting it.
Now I do want to actually just to kind of back up Mike's spam because I feel like I hope you don't feel like we're coming at you.
I love being disagreed with. Please do not feel like, oh, you're disagreeing with me. I feel bad.
Well,
no.
let me say this kind of. This is a part of your take that I actually do agree with, and this I actually, if you guys listened to episode 1 of High Roll Radio, I touched on this a bit. That I do think that there is a very key part of TFT like content that's missing, and I think this kind of goes in line with what you're saying, where the biggest issue in TFT is not that we don't have very dedicated fans, it's that we can't hold on to not very dedicated fans. We don't have viewership, we don't have fandom of the players who are kind of interested in TFT. Everyone who's watching a TFT event is like super into the game, whether they play a lot or they watch a lot. Like it just requires a lot of them. And mainly I think it's just because the content's not that digestible at like a tournament level. So like, while I don't agree that the onus is not on Riot to do more, I do agree that it's a community problem because I don't think our community really supports people who just want to watch an hour or two of TFT a week and feel like that's enough. Do you know what I mean? Yeah,
that's so when I was saying that like the super fan why wouldn't he turn into the tournament? My follow-up was going to be if a super fan can tell the difference, how do we get a casual fan to tell the difference? I completely agree.
Yeah.
Where is this post, by the way? Is it in competitive TFT or regular TFT?
Comp TFT.
Okay. Yeah, I want to read it. So
yeah, I'll see if I can find it.
Mike Sam, did you have any follow-up thoughts before we move on to our next caller?
Not really. I appreciate you guys taking the time.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, anything you want to shout out before you go?
Yeah, I'm a Pokemon Unite pro player. If you think our game has RNG, that game has RNG. All right. So if you guys want the real experience, come to Pokemon Unite.
All right.
Anything with Pokemon in the name, I believe it, honestly. That game is a mess.
All right, Mike Sam, thank you so much for joining us. We'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to our next caller. Yippee Mao Kaye is here. Where are you calling from?
YPK.
Guys, calling in from California. How's it going?
Good. Well, what do you want to talk about on the show?
Yeah, I had kind of a two-part question. So first is just off the back of the Checkmate format in Worlds. If you could create the optimal tournament format, what would it be? And also, how do you feel about a poker tournament style for additional tournaments in the scene where players can buy in to create a prize pool?
Oh shoot, that's pretty interesting. Okay. I feel like I'm gonna. I spoke a lot in the last take, so Ramblinnn or Robin, when do you guys want to
Sure.
start this?
I just want to address the first question. I don't think it's something I have a lot of thoughts on. If you could create the optimal tournament format, what would it be? I don't really think too much about like what the optimal tournament looks like, but maybe thinking bigger picture, I think about what like the whole set, format can look like. That's usually what we're asked for our feedback on. Is of course they ask us what do you think of this tournament and this exact ruling, et cetera, et cetera. But the problem with TFT is always not about the individual tournaments, but like just the consistency over the course of the set compared to the small sample size. So I don't know what the optimal individual tournament looks like, but I'm always in favor of something that is closer to a circuit.
Robin, what do you think?
Format, I have no idea. I feel like it's so complicated to find a format that like is like can be digestible and watchable, but also like fair in variance. One thing I noticed was like at least for NA, like how it's like 3-day tournament, and then like the first day like people get eliminated, then half get eliminated, then the second day another half, and then the final day is 8. Like I was thinking like maybe like day 1 and day 2 we can like it'll be 2 days of playing. So instead of like and then two days of playing, 8 games, no 6 games, and then after 12 games we eliminate down to the top 8. So it would be a 12 game sample size instead of a 6 game sample size. You know what I mean?
Not
so like you
yeah.
play.
Not,
yeah, you play
not,
like
not specifically what he's saying, but one of my favorite tournaments of the past was I don't know if this is the same for all the qualifiers, but the first major tournament I played in was set for the 4th qualifier, and it was 2 weekends. I don't know if it's called, maybe it was regionals. It was one of the two, but it was
regionals.
There was a 4-day tournament, and they cut down 8 each time, and I thought that feels so much better to me. I know they haven't really come back to that, but even like the doubles tournament that we participated, that was over a course of a month. I really like the multi-weekend tournaments personally.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Italian Super League, but I really like their format. It's actually it's pretty cool because it's over the course of I want to say 6 play days of 3 games each. So it's 18 games total, but it's over the course of like 3 or 4 weeks. The reason I really like that is one, it's still like the same amount of games that we're saying. I actually feel like it could probably be more games, but it's super digestible. It's only like 3 games a week that you really have to watch if you're a fan, something like that. And the other thing that's cool about it is that they introduce different leagues where they have like the amateur league, the blooming talent, I think it's called, and then their super league. They're like their top 16. And then they kind of work it from there to kind of go into like a finals, like their regional finals equivalent. I'm definitely a fan of the multi-week tournament. I think that should definitely be explored. Like Ramblinnn is mentioning, like in set 4, I think it was set 4 regionals.
I believe so, yeah.
Where they had, it was over the course of 2 weekends. And it was actually pretty interesting because if I remember correctly, I think it was Solus who like dominated the first weekend. And then you have
we had a whole week where you're hanging out on stream, talking to chat just like normal, you're practicing, but like that whole week was a unique experience where you're playing in a tournament that people have been cut out of, and that hasn't really been seen since then.
Right, and even thinking about things like you are VOD reviewing this past weekend and like the meta is shifting over the course of a patch, like we don't really get to see that. I think that's one of the most interesting things, is that we actually get to see the patch progress over the weekend instead of like being forced to just see a completely different patch. Because the majority of the time, the patch looks different on day 1 as it does in, day 10. So I'm definitely in favor of multi-weekend events.
Just approaching this from a different angle, and I don't want to branch too far from the topic, but one of the things that is commonly complained about is not being able to watch the perspective of your player, either because they're not on the mainstream or because they're playing at the same time as another one of your favorite players. So one thing I've seen in another region that I would personally be a fan of maybe exploring a little bit at least is not all of the games happening at the same time. So over the course of a day, you'll play like, let's say there's 6 games total to be played, but you only play 3 games on that day. So I would play in 3 games, and then Robin would go in and play his 3 games in his lobby. So you get to watch both of your favorite players if they're split up like that.
I think that would work really well for like a LAN event where you kind of have waves. Because the way I imagine is like, let's say we had a giant like 128 tournament in, I don't know, somewhere in California, and everyone's actually out there in the venue. You can now have like a stream where you can break it down in like waves of which top players are seeded to be playing in different points on stream. That would kind of obviously have different issues where now like those players may not be able to stream their own point of view. Either way though, I do like the idea of kind of breaking it out into waves where, if we're like we're saying before, a lot of the viewership is driven by like the personalities that people want to watch. If we can break it into waves where people have a very clear idea of like, I only need to dedicate 2.5 hours and now I can watch all of Ramblinn's games for the day. I think that sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, and then we just have to have like casters and stuff for the final lobby, I feel like.
Yeah. Do you think, is there a world where like people want like a pro view similar to like how League of Legends does it? Where
yes,
like
I think that like that world exists, and it's right here. It's like people, honestly, no disrespect to the casters, they do a great job, but a lot of the viewers do not care about the main cast, and I think they should give it a shot. I think it's really enjoyable to listen to, but they just want to watch their favorite players. So you don't even necessarily have to have every POV casted. You just need to have it accessible.
I have no idea what that.
Wait, what's pro view? What's pro view?
So in the LCS, you can. I don't know if it's still a thing, but like essentially, you can purchase a service where you can watch the actual point of view of a certain player in like tournament games. But I mean, I feel like for TFT, it would have to be like an open source thing. Like it could not be paid. We're like not
I
big
can
enough
speak
for that.
to LCS because I haven't watched it, but just as a very recent example, something I'm familiar with is Apex utilizes the command center on Twitch, and there's literally buttons at the top of the channel. You can click on your favorite team, navigate to their POV and their voice comms, but you can also still have the audio of the main cast if you want it. So you get your choice between the two. I think it's not. Like, if you haven't checked it out, I would definitely recommend. I don't know if it's available in VOD view, but whenever they do tournaments in the future, it's just a really enjoyable experience to me because you have direct access to whoever you want to watch.
So they have the technology already.
Yeah, it sounds like the tech is there.
I'm sure there's a certain level of it that's built into the game, and he would have to work on that.
Set 7.
I think that definitely needs to be the next step for TFT because that seems to fit perfectly in my mind.
Dino Dan brings up the fact that you can see like mouse clicks and camera movements, and I actually feel like that's one of the most fun parts about watching a POV in TFT that we're missing on the spectator mode, which I actually think is okay because if you're watching the main broadcast, it's going to be more for like a casual fan who may not want to see the camera jumping around constantly. But if I'm watching one of my favorite players play, I want to see them scouting and like nailing that Zephyr. Like that feels good to watch a player you're rooting for being able to like adapt and react to what they're seeing on screen. And it's definitely something that we're not seeing anymore with like the addition of spectator mode. And I wish there was some sort of like live view that they introduced into the main broadcast. All right. Well,
I mean, the second point, the buy-in tournament. I mean, I'm all for that. Like, I don't think there's any negatives.
Make an option. I think more tournaments in general would be great for TFT. Like we talked a little bit in the last point, just like the tourneys feel kind of distant, and that's maybe not the exact word to use, but I would kind of express that feeling. It feels like a lot of people aren't connected to the competitive community because they don't feel like they're a part of it. And I think offering up some more official casual tournaments would be a great idea. Something I don't know a lot about, but I just know is somewhat popular is Clash and League. I think something even closer to that in TFT, just having more actual Riot, official events that everybody can participate in would be a great thing for the community, so they can feel like they're actually a part of it.
Well, I'm curious. Let me ask you two, and actually, Yippee Mao Kaye, this applies to you as well. Obviously, you're another competitive player in TFT. Is what stops you guys from entering like amateur events?
It's the money and
time.
Money's not worth the time.
Yeah,
the level of competition is like it'd be hard to take it seriously, and no disrespect to those players, but I might as well just play a ladder game. It's that when you're above the players, it literally is the same, and that's not the point that we made last time. But like that's what ladder is to me. Is like it's not a competition; it's just for fun.
For me, I'm already playing 8 hours of TFT every day because of my job, so it's like, yeah, I don't want to do this amateur tournament. even if a lot of money was involved, because I feel like there's so much variance, I think that like, yeah, I don't know. I probably yeah. I used to do amateur tournaments though.
I
when
remember.
I didn't
Yeah.
yeah, I used to do this a long time ago, like in set 3, I did this circuit tournament actually, where like we played over a span of weeks, and you yeah, and you could record your points, and that was like probably my first tournament. I was like super excited to play. It was fun. So yeah, like I feel like amateur tournaments are good. If anyone wants to like, try competing in TFT, and they can't play in like official tournaments.
Yeah, if you haven't participated in Fight Night Rising, like I think that's a great opportunity to check out. I mean, especially if you are interested in getting into the upper echelon of competitive, that's the place to start. And I just think that could go even lower. I think they could build that even earlier.
I also so Goobums is bringing up something in chat that I also definitely agree with, that the streamer personality or top player actually has a lot to lose when they play, just because of the like reputation. And we play a game with a lot of variance. The reality is, like, I mean, you could enter a lobby where every single player is worse than you and go 8th. That is just the nature of the game we play. It's very possible. Is it likely? It's probably less likely than the opposite. But if you enter an amateur tournament, like, would either of you ever be concerned about like the reputation of like if you entered an amateur tournament and just like bombed out?
No. I wouldn't be, because like
I don't
I'll be like,
personally
I didn't try.
care. I mean, I think that's something reasonable to be worried about. The other thing that I'm just worried about in general is the meta in lower elo lobbies is actually very different. Not in terms of what's strong, but in terms of how the lobbies play. Players generally play a lot greedier, and they don't get punished the way they would in a higher lobby. And you as a higher skill player can actually get punished by not playing that same way. So what happens a lot of the time is I'll play my normal game. This is what happens when you get queued into a master lobby and why they're so scary. You're always afraid of that minus 90, but it's very realistic because you play your normal game. You play what gives you the highest EV, but there's 6 players in the lobby that are just playing, hoping they hit, and they do. Sometimes they do. They don't play optimally, but sometimes they play greedy and it works out for them and you get punished. So that can totally happen in a tournament all the same.
Yippee Maokai, I think we're good on this take, but is there anything you want to shout out before you get going?
No, just appreciate you guys having me on and taking the time to talk about it.
All right, well, have a great night. We'll see you soon.
Thanks.
All right, moving into our next caller. Lawrence is here. Lawrence, where are you calling from?
Hi there. I'm calling from Oregon.
All right, what do you want to talk about?
All right, so my take is that after watching Worlds, there are some negatives involved in the Checkmate format. I feel like forcing players to target a certain player or set of players warps the gameplay, like so they don't lose, they need to target this player potentially. Also requiring somebody to go first sometimes means that the best player doesn't win. However, my take at the end of the day is that this format is a step in the right direction in a lot of aspects. The viewership experience of being hyped to see somebody get first or them to not get first, like people were probably actively rooting against the Chinese players if they're an NA fan, such as myself, and that's awesome. There are no tiebreakers, and for the most part, it's pretty straightforward. It also is very encouraging of top 2 to 3 gameplay instead of like just being okay with top 4, because if you consistently get top 4 in a BO6, you generally do well. If you get like a first or a second, you'll just win the tournament. Then once you get to that break point, it's very competitive because you have to try to get that first to win. I think in this format, I think it's the future of competitive TFT.
Okay.
I think it's very simple. Like Checkmate format is better for viewers, it's a better viewership experience, but it's worse competitively. So you have to find a balance between that. And I think Checkmate is probably the I think for Worlds it's fine to do Checkmate, but for everything else, I don't think it should be Checkmate. Or maybe for like NA regionals finals or regional finals, maybe. I just think like if you don't do Checkmate, if a person can top 4, if a person can win before the last game already, it's so bedge. Like everyone just playing the last game for no reason.
I agree.
I don't think that can ever be so as of now, I don't like if someone can come up with a better format for like the hype of getting a first and winning, plus also being fair for the competitors, then that's probably ideal. But right now, like I can't really think of anything else. But it's definitely not like the best player definitely doesn't win though. I feel like all the time because they just high roll like 3 times and they win,
What do you think, Ramblinnn?
This is something I will probably not be able to discuss super well in depth because I just fundamentally disagree with the idea that Checkmate is more enjoyable to watch. I can understand why Riot and probably a lot of viewers feel that way, but this is something I kind of talked about earlier in another topic, is that I don't really care that much about who wins. So I don't put much stake in the winner being the one that wins the whole thing, like the winner of the game winning the whole tourney, because I don't put that much more weight on that compared to everything else. You talked about how we're rooting against China, but I'm rooting against China not because I want Guams to win, it's because I don't want the tourney to end. And I think that's honestly a problem of Checkmate, is the potential for 4 games to happen. I feel like that shouldn't even be a thing, and that's maybe just discussing the threshold a little bit. The threshold I think is too low. I think if we're playing anything less than 6 games, that's a mistake. Not necessarily the people that designed the format, because you can only stretch that so far. It's probably 5 would be the minimum, because you have to kind of go on both sides of 6. But the other thing is, you talked about how it's not exciting if the winner is already decided before the last game, but the scale only shifts so much. If you look at the 4th game that happened, the winner was decided halfway through that game. If you know anything about 8 Bodyguard, and if you were watching Gubam's perspective in particular, he knew when the game was over. I knew when the game was over. The rest of the game didn't matter. The tourney was over. So is it being a half game later that much of a difference? To me, it wasn't. It's just as anticlimactic.
I think. Go for it. Yeah, follow up.
I was about to say, just to also give context for this, like I help run amateur tournaments, so like this is actually like something super relevant to me. I'm like pretty excited about this. I think in my actual take that I put in the Discord, I think I think this format, or a format similar to this, is the future. I think that this needs like a lot of changing, because I was also watching at 5 a.m. for me, and that was kind of awful to have it end after 4 games because I was so hyped. So I totally agree, and I think that threshold should be closer to like say 21. But then you have to try to think like, wow, this might actually go to like 8+ games, and I think that's okay. But I totally agree with what Ramblinnn said, where it should not end before 5 games. Like that was a definite negative. I would agree.
I don't know that I necessarily have a solution. I do want to present what I think is like the best version of TFT, and to me, I think. And I've said this in one of my YouTube videos before, that like I think TFT is at its best when you widen the bullseye of like results. An example of that is these qualification tournaments, like regional finals, where 4 players are advancing. The reality of the game we play is that sometimes you are not playing for 1st or 2nd or 3rd. Sometimes you are literally just playing for 4th. And I think that TFT is at its best when the bullseye is wide enough to kind of provide an opportunity for even the players who are low rolling to be rewarded or to be highlighted. I think that, Robin, I remember you talked about actually after regionals, obviously you were in that last lobby, you just barely missed out on the last chance qualifier spot, and you VOD reviewed and you tweeted, I want to say, talking about how even though you low rolled, you had the opportunity, like you could have played good enough to gain a qualification spot. To me, I think that's like when TFT is at its best, where like even the low rollers could have made, this qualification spot. Obviously, it has to end somewhere, though. To me personally, I'm okay with Checkmate because I don't really put much stock in who the winner is. I'm just more interested in kind of seeing how like the regions do as a whole, because I think like the way I like to look at it is like increase the sample size by grouping all the players from a region together and then looking at it that way. Or even if you like a handful of players, like kind of grouping it that way. To me, it's fun to see larger groupings that give more data, because I think it's like at least a little bit more interesting, because the reality is like the odds of the best player winning Checkmate format is probably just not very good, right? Like it's 6 games, 4 games. Like it's sometimes like there's just no way that you're ever going to get, accurate data out of that. I don't know if there's a real answer. To be honest, I think that Checkmate's probably fine. I don't think it's great. I don't know if there's a very clear, better solution though, which I think is kind of the how like this conversation tends to go every time it's brought up, that like Checkmate is probably not the ideal solution, but it's kind of the best thing we have right now. Someone in chat says, what if there were 2 thresholds? One where you get a first after 18 points if you win, but then if you get 32 points regardless of whether you win. That is a format that we actually use, and we
They have done it before, and it just doesn't seem like they're comfortable using for Worlds because they don't even want that to be an option. Like, obviously, I would personally be in favor of that being an option, but they don't seem to want it to be an option. So, like, I don't know if it's even worth discussing because we only have so much say in it.
We had that for NA regionals, set 4, I think, or something. I don't know. I remember playing in one of those.
That's like almost every Checkmate before has had that, honestly. Like, they took it away recently. Like, it used to be a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lauren, do you have
Actually,
any follow-up thoughts?
Yeah, I actually think I totally agree with that. I think when I had talked about this a couple weeks ago with somebody, I actually brought up that my thought is that the general best way to like say like somebody is the best player is not first, is generally top 3 in my opinion. So I think having that second threshold of getting top 2 or top 3 at X point is a much better way to go about it, and I'm definitely actually like writing a note like right now to use that if I ever do use this, because I like don't think that getting first should be like the way that you win. But then it also kind of takes away from that point about what makes this format such a hype thing for like the casual viewer. It makes it super straightforward. They need to get first, and then you be like it gets down to like the top 2, top 3, and like any point before that where somebody like, oh, I've already won, is like people just like start leaving the stream, and it just becomes like less climactic. But if you like top 2, like you need to get top 2, then it kind of just like shuts the like the hype down. But if you need to get first, that's like amazing. So I'm like rambling a little bit here, but like no pun intended. But like you kind of get what I'm going at with that. I think I agree with like the top 3 kind of needing to be there.
Yeah, obviously at a certain level, you know, we have to figure out a way to both reward these better performing players on the day while also making sure that the tournament is it's just a hard problem. I feel like there's no real good answer. So I think we're going to cut it there and move on to the next caller, Lawrence, but we appreciate the call. Is there anything you want to shout out before you go?
Of course. Yeah, as I mentioned, I help run tournaments. If you guys are actually, as Ramblinnn and I think you guys just got into in general, we run a form of a TFT league every set. If you guys are looking for that kind of gameplay, be sure to check us out on Aegis Esports GG on Twitter. Thanks for having me. It was fun.
All right. Thanks so much for calling in. We'll see you later.
Alrighty.
I feel like I should stop saying I'll see you later. I'm not seeing any of these people later.
I'll be back next week.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to our next caller. And Prime is here. Prime, where are you calling from?
Yeah, I'm calling from Chicago.
All right. What do you want to talk about?
Sure. So I don't know about you guys, but I've really enjoyed Set 6, and I think that it kind of reached a new level of complexity, one that I think maybe TFT hasn't seen before with all these augment choices and everything. So my question is, you know, the augments that we have right now and the Set 6 mechanic is very complex and kind of refreshes the game for a lot of people. I'm talking mostly from a casual viewpoint, right? How do you feel set 7 could like maybe surpass or compete with Set 6? And I guess I'm asking this in terms of like, how would it impact the competitive players? What would they want? And maybe, I guess casual players is kind of hard to answer, but I don't know if it should go in a more complex route or maybe a more simple and refined route. I'm kind of curious what direction you think the game might be heading in terms of set mechanics.
Okay. Do you guys have any preference on the order of this? Either of you guys want to take this first?
Go for it.
I don't know what they can do more. I mean, I'm not a creative person, so I don't know, but they probably have something in plan. But I like augments. I think they make the game more interesting and more replayability. Like even for me right now, I'm playing Zillion Reroll every single game. The augments actually make it more fun because I have a different variation of that reroll comp, right? Sometimes I have like broken stopwatch Zillion or like sniper Zillion, you know, it's pretty fun. In terms of the question, like what could they do more or less? I don't know. Like I'm not that creative enough. I don't know what they have plans for Set 7, but probably just like I mean that they're probably gonna do that, like create more fun augments that don't fuck with the competitive aspect. But yeah,
I'll say one thing, and that's just kind of bouncing off what Robin says. I think they could potentially throw in, this is just a random idea I just came up right now, but they could throw in some kind of augment that is like the same, like everyone gets it, and it's like game warping almost like a galaxy. And it could just be something that's completely random that happens. Like instead of getting, I don't know, this might not be a good idea, but like instead of getting 3 choices, it's like, and everybody gets something that changes the game. I don't know. Just like that could be something that they could throw in. I would hope and expect they don't. I don't think they have the resources to do this because they're including augments, and it's kind of hard to fit everything in. But I would not want them to do another mechanic on top of it as big of it this particular set. I think they should focus on getting augments the best that they can, and maybe just focus on the unit quality instead. For example, that's something I would enjoy if they just made the units really fun and the traits really fun, because that's the best way to supplement augments, in my opinion.
So you would prefer like a simpler route?
I personally think this is a great time to refine the game, and the debate. Like they've been kind of putting off some of the like changes to the game that would complete, like the changes to infrastructure, like matchmaking, for example. And I'm not saying they can do them all this set, but I think this is a good time to reevaluate those things while they're just iterating on augments.
I want to shout out Goobums for suggesting Giga Prismatics, tier 4 augments.
Like I'm definitely not literally that, but something in that vein I think is realistic, honestly.
All right, so here's my thoughts. So I don't know how many people listen to the Triforce Tactics podcast featuring Spicy Appies, Ramkev, and Jirachi, but they had Mort on a couple weeks ago. I don't remember exactly when it was, and Mort talked about this idea of refining augments. And what he said is, what if what we're seeing right now is just augments v1? The assumption is that we're going to keep iterating on it and eventually get to a better version of augments that are more balanced, that are more fun, blah, 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 blah. The way I read into that is I don't think Mort would say that on a public podcast, and this is complete speculation. If he didn't truly believe that they actually just have a better version of augments coming out, I'm pretty sure that whatever version of augments we're going to be seeing in the future is just going to be a much, much better version of it. And to me, I agree with Ramblinnn that I think that should probably just be enough. Just tack on like a little tiny, put armories back in or something, and then just like make the units really cool. I actually don't think the TFT needs like any super crazy set mechanics from like right now to make the game a lot of fun. Like I think it's more fun to just like have these wacky builds, have these units that you really love, these lines that you like to explore and learn about. And I don't know, like have the units diversify the game instead of the set. I also was not a huge fan of galaxies, to be honest. So I don't know if I want to see like something like completely transformative of that.
I like the ideas, but there were just so many bad ones that it's hard to have an overall positive opinion on them.
Yeah, exactly. Prime, do you have any follow-up thoughts?
Yeah, I do. So I'm going to kind of relate this to one of my experiences, but I played RuneScape when I was a kid, right? And RuneScape came out with an old school version that, of course, a lot of people love, and I'm sure maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't. But they basically brought back the 2007 version of the game in like 2014, and everyone loved it, right? I've been playing TFT since like set 1, pretty casually, honestly, but a lot of people didn't get to experience prior set mechanics, and some of them are loved, some of them are per se, some of them maybe not so good. Like if you reintroduce them, right, it wouldn't work out. But of course, they have a lot of like prior mechanics and assets that they could work with prior. And I had actually thought about this, but there's game modes, hyper roll, double up, right? Do you see value in using all of the prior set mechanics, or just in general mechanics within TFT, for a future game mode, like fun throwback game mode, or even to influence a future set? Is that something you think would be healthy, or maybe
I think
dangerous?
It'd be more fun to have it as like a rotating game mode, or like a throwback weekend where like you load it into a game type that gives you a random set or something like that. Like I think that'd be fun.
I think Mort has expressed some level of interest, and it's just a matter of time and resources, and that's something that to me would not be, obviously in lane with the actual set, new release set. That's just a side thing. So I'm in favor of it, but it would never replace the main game.
Yeah. I think everyone would love it, but I don't think they have the time and resources to do that. Maybe, but in China, they allow people to play set 1 actually. Yeah. So I don't know China TFT or China Mobile or something, but you can actually play. They have like a lot of features. Like you can play set 1.
I'm down for puzzle mode.
Yeah, they have puzzle mode, which is pretty cool. Like they show you an instance and like how do you solve this, how do you get out of this spot or something, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I think everyone will love it, but I just don't know if they have the manpower to do it.
Just to kind of bounce off of that to Ramblinnn and Robin, if we did have puzzle mode or some sort of like practice tool or something, like a lab for the game, how much do you think the game actually changes?
I don't think the ceiling changes that much, but the level at which things are solved it goes way faster. It's really accelerated. So, I mean, if people really want to test things, there are ways to do it. So, like those avenues exist already, and if you really want to, you haven't explored them. I've explored them. It's not that hard, but just having it that accessible as you're saying is like an actual testing mode would make like solving a patch or like testing an interaction way more.
Wait, that'd be so cool. Like you could just go in and be like, pick a champion, pick what items you want on them on which hex, and then just click play, and then it starts the fight. Dude, that'd be so good. We're gonna win worlds if we get that.
We're gonna win. We're the only ones gonna have it, or what?
Yeah,
well,
only,
I guess
only.
Yeah, I mean, it also would probably be a lot easier for people to kind of get into the game. I don't know. When you're saying things would get solved faster, Ramblinnn, I feel like that also kind of introduces like if we're on a bad patch, we're gonna find out we're on a bad patch real fast.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of bounce off that, what I'd like to see, and this is something Aegon wrote up a whole post about, but like some kind of campaign for TFT, I think would be actually really good. Some kind of story mode. It doesn't have to be super complicated. Just a way to introduce players to the game that isn't a mobile tutorial, which is like that's fine, but something that's cozy and it's casual and you can just play for fun and enjoy it, and you figure out whether you like the game or not instead of throwing yourself into a public match and having no clue what you're doing. Like I think that'd be really good for the game.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's a lot of people who like are more interested even in just like campaigns, even if they're not that complicated. I don't know. I feel like anything to kind of widen the pipeline of getting people into TFT, especially, I don't know, like Aegon's post on it, if anyone hasn't read it, I don't actually know exactly. I think if you go to aegon.gg is where you can find it. It was really interesting, and it was kind of simple. Like, it wasn't super complicated. It felt like a lot of fun. Oh yeah, Aegon linked it in chat if you want to read it. Definitely encourage that read. It was super interesting. I can't imagine that Riot hasn't thought about it. I'm sure it's just like on their list of a billion things to add to this game. Prime, did you have any follow-up thoughts before we move on?
Yeah. I'm waiting for the next mech pilot so I can one trick again, and then big shout out to Ramblinnn. He just opened up his coaching again. He's coached me before. Get it while it's hot, and yeah, it's everything for me.
All right. Well, Prime, thank you so much for joining us. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you.
All right. Now, I really, really wanted this person to call in, someone who basically stole a take from Goobums in chat. So I am just going to represent them in this call, and I'm going to present their take for them. And you two can respond to this. The top 15 is entirely based on reputation, because who VOD reviews the 20 or so candidates for the top 15 seriously? Nobody. What do you guys think?
I mean, okay, I think that I have two takes on this. First is that it depends entirely on the person. I imagine there are people that are rating mostly on reputation, but I didn't VOD review because I've watched these players the entire set. I don't think I watched literally the most, but I watch a lot of TFT, so I don't have to VOD review because I've been watching them the entire time. So my list is based on, yes, their reputation to an extent, but I've been watching them the whole time, so I know how they played. I know how well they played. So I feel like my list at least is somewhat informed. Obviously not as much as somebody like Bryce's, but I feel confident saying I can speak on how well this player has played this set, and not just based on their placements and their reputation.
Robin,
I think it's to some extent, like Ramblinnn said, it depends on the judge person that's doing it, right? Like for me, I even said it before the podcast, I didn't do that much research on Kev Chen, Yippee Mao Kaye, and Pawn Up and people like that. So they didn't make it on my list, but they probably should have been on the list, maybe like in the bottom, and some players should not be on the list, like maybe like Soju or Spencer or Socks or something. But I did do some minor research on Liquipedia and stuff, obviously I don't have time to like bod review anyone, so I don't even know like I honestly don't know how good they are other from their solo queue and their tournament performance. So I would say to some extent, and it depends on the person judging, that reputation does overlap actual how they actually did in that set, I would say.
So here's my thought. I feel like at some level, is there ever an MVP voting that has nothing to do with reputation? Like, no. Every single MVP voting in every sport ever has not been objective. It's always going to be subjective based on a variety of factors. Last week, Goobums was on here and we talked a bit about stats and their usefulness or uselessness in rankings. I actually feel like in this specific criteria where we're talking about the entirety of the set and looking back to see which players were the best performers, this is one of those few times where stats really are going to be a very important indicator. The thing about statistics, and I'm going to go on a quick rant because I feel like this is the only time I can really do this, is that stats are always going to be descriptive, not prescriptive, right? Like they tell you what's happened in the past, but they don't tell you how good a player is right now. That's just the reality of it, and that's why something like the eye test is valuable. I don't think it's fair to say, though, that even the players who are, there probably are some players who are just purely basing it off reputation. I mean, Kiyun literally took the top 15 players on ladder and put them in order for one of his ballots back at like the beginning of set 6. There's like a certain level where like, yeah, some people are going to take more effort or put more effort into their ballot. But like a lot of the top players have been in calls with these players. A lot of players have been VOD reviewing with different players over the set. I mean, especially I feel like at the time of regionals, like Robin, were you like ever in those calls for like, oh yeah, you did the VOD reviews of your own regional stuff. Obviously Ramblinnn was in things before like last chance qualifier, but like, I imagine you guys have like a relatively intimate relationship with the other like high caliber players, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so like the evidence is there. I think it's in pretty bad faith to say that the panelists in the power rankings are going purely based off reputation, at least for like the wide majority of them. Even someone like me, who is like probably the least qualified to be on this ballot, I would say like I definitely put in a lot of work for my ballot. Like nobody's just doing like a random order based on like what they think about people. So I definitely disagree with the take, and it sounds like both Ramblinnn and Robin, it sounds like you agree to a certain degree.
I would say like it's really hard though, because like not every tournament mattered. You know what I mean? Right. So it's like it's kind of unfair for players like who are really good at solo queue. If you're really good at solo queue, you don't even need to do good in like most of the tournaments. It doesn't really matter to you. So like for example, like Setsuko, he's like camping rank 1 like forever, right? Does he care about any of the cups? Not really. But you can say like, oh, he did, but he just didn't try. But like, if it actually mattered, they would actually like, VOD review and like actually train for it. Actually, really, there's actually like trying, not trying. Like also like, yeah. So I feel like, some players who are not good at solo queue, tried harder for these tournaments, and then they're gonna have better placements than players that don't need the tournament. So then, if you're basing it purely off tournament placements, then those players would be like, I'm just giving like an example of like Pawn Up and Soju or something, right? Like Pawn Up like busted his ass on every tournament, like did really well. Soju didn't really care about the tournaments, but he got in through like solo queue or something. Or Setsuko is probably a better example. Then like Pawn Up would be better than Setsuko. So like I think like it's kind of hard to judge based off tournament, in my opinion. So some have to be on, like I think Bryce said, like eye level, right? Eye level and like solo queue and just generally like how good they are, I guess. So I think it's really hard to actually, I don't know. I just think like, yeah, you can't really base it off tournaments, I would say.
So Ramblinnn, you're like one of those players who historically, I mean, you have actually at this point probably just the best tournament results in North America across all sets. I'm curious kind of to hear your opinion on like the weight of tournament results versus like, I mean, obviously I imagine you'll say eye test is going to be more valuable, but how much stock do you put into tournament result?
mentioned this somewhat earlier when we were talking about ladder. I think this was even before the show, but I'll just repeat what I said. When it comes to TFT, I am not very quick to discredit a player based on a poor performance. I'm more looking to think more highly of them because they did well. And you have to look at those performances. And I'm going to give a specific example. I actually rate Solus pretty highly. I'm not going to say where in my ballot, but I think he deserves the credit for how he did this set. But that doesn't mean that his scores in the tournaments, he didn't play necessarily that well. So you have to go and look at the actual games themselves. But really, I'm going to give you another example on the opposite end is Nubal. I don't think he's even eligible for ranking this time. I probably wouldn't have put him on my ballot even if he was. But him doing poorly in tournaments, I don't necessarily think lower of him. I just can't rate him higher because he hasn't done that well in tournaments. So that's how I usually look at TFTs, because it's such a game of variance. Everybody's going to have a bad result, and sometimes those results are stringed together. So I really just look to the players that can get through that variance and perform consistently well. And in my case, I'm somebody that does that. So I, of course, would rate myself highly. And there's other players that are in that vein that I also rate because they do manage to get past that medium bar that is TFT of 4.5 or whatever you want to mark it as.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. All right. Well, I feel like we talked about this quite a bit. We're at that 90-minute mark there, so we can start to wrap it up. But thank you to everybody who's called in tonight. If you guys want to support the show, you can subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on the podcast app. Anywhere you can find your podcast, you'll be able to find this podcast. So feel free to follow, subscribe, leave a rating. All that does a lot to support the show. Ramblinnn and Robin, thank you both so much for coming out here. Ramblinnn, you have anything to shout out before we go?
Shout out to this awesome community, TFT and my own. It's a pleasure to be a part of. I came over from the Destiny side. Shooters feel just as welcome here as there. So I really appreciate you guys, and I appreciate the devs team as well. Mort, all of them. It's been a pleasure.
Robin, you have anything to shout out?
Shout out to you for making all this content. You have like S tier content all the time, so keep doing what you're doing. Hopefully we get LAN events soon and we can have like LAN event content and like we can meet up in real life, our own stuff. And shout out to Riot for making such an awesome game. No ads, no OKH business. Hopefully set 7 will be really fun. TFT just has so much potential. So hopefully like they can, hopefully Riot can invest more money into it, more manpower, and then they can build all these things that they want to build. And shout out to my Twitch community. Thank you guys for the support.
If anyone is watching and for whatever reason is here, not because of Ramblinnn and Robin and do not know that they stream, highly unlikely. But on the off chance that that's why you're here, just to watch the show, definitely make sure to follow both Ramblinnn and Robin on Twitch. They both stream, I believe, every day or at least every weekday. You can find their schedules and things either on Twitter or on their Twitch. Again, thank you both so much for coming out here. I had a lot of fun talking with you and all the callers who called in. But that's going to do it for episode number 3 of High Roll Radio. We'll see you all next time.